the Goob here, coming at you with another episode of Rewriting History with the Goob. Yeah, I know I haven't fed my dog yet, and she's whining at me already. So this week I'm going to be starting to tackle. This is going to be a several week project, but the idea of conspiracies and cover-ups and how they actually happen, especially with the idea of a global conspiracy to cover up the history of the world. That's a pretty large allegation. So how is something like that even possible? And today I'm going to try and address that issue, the issue of it's just too big. It's just too big to be possible. And then in the following weeks, get into more details of the more intricate parts of how this all works. Before I get into that, I did go to the Mormon church this week and got a guy's number, so hopefully sometime this week I'll be able to meet up with him and talk about Mormon history a little bit, see if he'd be interested in coming on the show, see how much he knows first. I don't know how fruitful this will be, but I am pursuing it, so that could be cool. In a couple weeks we might have a Mormon guest. But on to the issue of it's just too big. How could there be a global conspiracy to cover up history without every single archaeologist being involved in it? And I'm actually going to allege that not a single archaeologist needs to directly be involved in this conspiracy. Before I do that, though, I'm going to demonstrate that quite a few archaeologists are involved with intelligence agencies and various groups. So when I was looking into the NAGPRA laws, I also looked into the 1990s laws, and there was a whole bunch of controversy over these laws at the time. Yeah, I guess they don't do the caffeine, do they? Yeah, it was the only thing of note. I meant to mention this. The only thing that of note from the experience this morning was that there was definitely a disproportionate amount of redheads in this small church. There was only like 100 people, and there was probably over a dozen redheads there. So I don't know. There were a lot of redheads. I don't know if that's common throughout Mormonism or if it was just this church, but somewhat interesting. So wouldn't every single archaeologist have to be involved in this? Right, I already said that. I was looking into the NAGPRA laws. A lot of controversy around them. A lot of people upset about them. The archaeologists and the anthropologists were not happy about the NAGPRA laws. But there was something else at the same time that they were also not happy about that was being discussed simultaneously, which was all of the archaeologists and anthropologists' involvement with intelligence agencies. So during the big conference that was held, or one of them, over these NAGPRA laws, they ended up taking a vote trying to ban archaeologists and anthropologists from working with any of these intelligence agencies because so many archaeologists and anthropologists were working with these intelligence agencies that a lot of countries were just rejecting. They wouldn't even let them, through customs. If you were an archaeologist or an anthropologist, you were just getting rejected at the border because those careers had become synonymous, essentially, with CIA and other three-letter agencies. So many archaeologists and anthropologists were going over into other countries and, giving these careers a bad name by working with these agencies and doing whatever they were doing, right? That a lot of countries were just like, you're not welcome here anymore. So the anthropologists and archaeologists who weren't involved with these agencies were pretty pissed off at the ones who were, because now they're not able to do their job. These countries are just reject. They won't even let them into the country, so they can't, go and explore and investigate these things. And this vote is public record. Don't quote me on these numbers here because I don't necessarily remember, but I feel like there was a whole lot of people who abstained from voting. But of the people who did vote, I think it was a 60-40 split, with 60% voting not to ban cooperation with these agencies. So take that as you will. It sure seems that again, even ignoring the vote numbers, just the fact that multiple different countries were rejecting these people from even being allowed in their country because it had become, again, essentially synonymous with being, working for a three-letter agency. So that was in the 90s. Some of those people are certainly still working in archaeology and anthropology today. And I'm certain that they've inducted newer people into those agencies, to cooperate with them from archaeology and anthropology. So there is a very significant amount of cooperation between these groups here. But I'm going to explain how, without any direct involvement, this is still possible. A global cover-up of history is still possible, because really the only thing that you need is to control the narrative. You guys are sick of me talking about the narrative, but yeah, so Zahi Hawass is an interesting one. I don't know how closely you guys follow him in Egyptology, but there are numerous different tunnels and entrances and cavities and voids, whatever you want to call them, that are outwardly denied completely. Their existence is said to be non-existent, according to Zahi Hawass in Egyptology, and they just keep getting caught in these lies. They're all real. There's rumors of the library underneath the Sphinx and stuff, and I don't know if there's anything to that, but there are multiple different tunnels in and around the Sphinx, all of which were completely denied as existing by Zahi Hawass. I don't know if they've changed their positions now that it's more openly known. I mean, people have been inside these things, people have filmed them, so it's a lot harder to say that they don't exist when you can watch some guy on YouTube walking into the Sphinx. But I know that he was openly claiming they didn't exist. And it's standard operating procedure, right? Slav knows. But they don't need every archaeologist involved in this. They just need to control the narrative. The narrative is incredibly strong, especially in America, where the pre-Columbus narrative is absolutely not allowed, no matter what. The people who work in this industry, they understand that there are very real consequences if they step outside of that narrative. And this exists in pretty much any industry across the board. There's several interviews with retired newscasters about this very topic. And they get asked, like, so who told you that you weren't allowed to talk about these topics? And they always have the exact same response. They laugh and they're like, no one told us. No one needs to tell you that you're not allowed to cover these things. You just know. There's no memo that goes around. You just know that if you cover this, your job's going to be over and your reputation's going to be ruined. It's an unspoken narrative, and the same thing exists in archaeology. And it's well established. There's a long list, not only of people who have been slandered for coming out with the truth, but something that goes against the mainstream. But there's a pretty substantial list of archaeologists who have taken their own life because they were so brutally attacked by their colleagues and by the media, because they came out with something that ultimately was vindicated, after their death, sometimes decades later. I mean, they come after you so incredibly viciously. So you can see, I've covered with the pre-Clovis stuff, right? There was that lentil found in the middle of the woods with ancient Jewish writing on it. And it wasn't even found by the guy who proved pre-Clovis cultures. but it was inspected by him after some hikers found it. And so that was the reason given on the Wikipedia article. I remember laughing about this with you guys, and swearing, that the reason they give for dismissing this find is because that guy was involved in it. And he lied about the pre-Clovis cultures, so obviously this is also bogus. Obviously he was right. There were pre-Clovis cultures. But that's still written in the Wikipedia article, right? Even after you're vindicated, your life isn't fixed. It's not like everything that you lost is returned to you. It's not even like your dignity and your reputation are returned to you. They still slander you even after you've been vindicated. And so no one needs to be told not to go against this narrative. And if you have a coworker that is ballsy enough that, they find something and they go, I want to present this and I want to rewrite history here, you, again, also know their life's going to be ruined. If you stand by their side, your life is going to be ruined. Most likely you're going to distance yourself from your coworker there, because you know of these very real consequences. You live in this world. And I'll give you an example of what happens both when these initial measures don't work and someone who's coming in from outside of this world. So Gunung Padang is a great example, because, right. But Gunung Padang is a great example because you have this archaeologist who's going, this structure might be 25 or even 52,000 years old, right? So he's going way outside of the narrative, and his colleagues, his coworkers, they immediately distance themselves from him, but he pushes forward. He goes, I've found something incredible. I want to rewrite history. Consequences be damned. I'm going to push this forward. And somehow, I don't know the exact details, but it gets all the way to the president of Indonesia. And Indonesia is where Gunung Padang is. And the president of Indonesia is not in this archaeology world. He doesn't know this unspoken narrative because he's not in this world. He's a normal guy. Obviously, he's the president of a country, but he's a normal guy in that he's outside this archaeology realm and this archaeology narrative. So he hears this and, like a normal guy, thinks that is the coolest thing I've ever heard. You're telling me that the oldest structure in the world is here in my country? You have got every resource at your disposal. Manpower, money, whatever you need, you've got it. I've got your back. Go get to the bottom of this, dig this up, and figure out what's going on here. So normally, when there is an outlier who's willing to go against the narrative, if the power of the narrative doesn't keep them from doing so, and the consequences that are known to be coming with it doesn't keep them from doing so, usually it then goes to the media. And the media starts slandering this person, and they start, discrediting their name and just poisoning the well so that anyone who goes anywhere near this topic is also toxic, right? And that's usually enough to deal with 99.9% of these cases. But Gunung Padang somehow, like I said, it skipped a few steps. It got all the way up to that president before the media could really get involved. And so what happens then? And that's when the WEF sends in one of their goons, and I don't know what leverage they had. I don't know what dirt they may have had. I don't know how they accomplished it exactly, but they pulled their strings. They had a meeting with the president of Indonesia, and he did a full 180 from you have every resource at our disposal to this site is shut down. We're not looking into this anymore. There's no more digs happening. This site is closed. So, not only is the industry itself full of all of these stooges that are working with these three-letter agencies, but the media is also controlled. If they need to step in, if someone gets outside of that and they keep pushing forward anyways, the media will poison it and they'll tear them down and they'll make the idea completely toxic to touch. And if all of that doesn't work, they will take direct intervention. They will pull strings over a world leader, the president of a country. They will have a meeting with them and tell them, hey, you better, what you want to do there, you better not do it. They will kill people. They'll do whatever they need to do. And it really is incredibly frustrating for me to hear people with this argument of it's just too big, because at this point that's just too retarded. You are fucking stupid if you're still spouting that bullshit. And I don't even apologize. It really, there's certain types of stupidity that really upset me, and this is exactly that type. Like Danny Polishchuk, one of my favorite comedians, he makes jokes about politics and current events. Like he made the Noticinol video, right? You can't make funny jokes about this stuff without having a really good understanding of it. So he understands this stuff. He sees all of this happening. He understands what's happening. But then he also turns around and, like, when Trump was shot and it was very obvious that this was not only a conspiracy but a huge conspiracy involving tons of people, he's like, but it's just too big. I just can't accept it. And it's like he's been taking that Noticinol apparently. So, I get it. It's uncomfortable to realize that that's the reality of the world we're living in. But, I don't think sticking your head in the sand helps anything. We had COVID where 3 world leaders chose to reject the vaccines. And very shortly, 3 world leaders were dead. One of them was straight up assassinated. One had a heart attack. I forget what happened to the third one. And quite literally, on day 1 of the new leadership, they were already importing vaccines. So, I mean, this control is so blatant. It's so in your face. They are running the world, right? You have Angela Merkel, Merkel or whatever, who was the chancellor of Germany at the time. And I'm truncating this story, but the, paraphrase version of it is that she was going to go with a different vaccine. Bill Gates has a meeting with her, and overnight she does a 180, and we go, we're buying the Bill Gates vaccine. Let me get that Gates brand. All of this stuff is so in your face and obvious. I mean, we are living in 1984. We are absolutely living in 1984. Kamala, the border czar, right? They'd start deleting all of the articles, and that doesn't shock me. What shocks me is the reaction to it. The people who it's like, oh, I found an article that they missed and didn't delete, and like, look what I found. Like, look, it's real. Like, that's their reaction to it. And for me, it's just like, I don't know. Don't you just remember? Like, don't you just remember? And the reality, I guess, is that most people don't. Most people don't. Most people don't care. Most people don't want to remember, right? It's a hell of ignorance truly is bliss. And it's a hell of a lot easier to just go, oh, that's what they're saying now? Okay, and go with the flow. Except for most people, it's not even that's what they're saying now, because they don't remember what they said before. They just go, oh, that's what it is. That's what it always has been. Why wouldn't it have always been that, right? And I think a lot of this obviously is because the world has been designed to create that response. But also I think a lot of it is willful. Ignorance is bliss. Why burden yourself with trying to keep track of all of the lies and what's true and what's not when you can just go with the flow and live your life? And yeah, I don't know. Let me read some comments here, see what you fellas have been saying. By the way, I am using Zoom again. I've tried to figure out other solutions, and it's nothing else really seems to work. When this meeting does run out, I will switch to StreamYard, which kind of works, but there's some issues with it. So, let me know in chat when that happens, how bad it is, if it's tolerable. You'll have to deal with it for at least 10 minutes because of the new retarded Zoom rules before I can switch back to this. But, I'll figure it out. I've got the hiccups now. Okay, not a whole lot going on in the chat. Feel free to call in, by the way, especially if you guys have questions. If you feel like I'm not addressing things adequately, please call in, ask me your questions. I'm very confident in my ability to answer them. So much of this is so obvious to me because I've been thinking about this for decades now. Long before I was into history, I was into conspiracies. So I'm steeped in this stuff. It's all very obvious to me at this point, but I understand it's not obvious to everyone. So I might glaze over things because I think they'll just automatically be understood. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. So, you know, if you do have questions, please call in. And yeah, well, you know, you can give it a try, Mr. Galunas, if you want. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where to take it. Like, if I need to go hammer the points I've already made more, give more examples, and or if that's adequate, I don't know. But you have NAGPRA, the new NAGPRA laws, which just erased an entire nation's history. No one else is even aware of this besides us, right? That is a massive thing that just happened. No one even knows about it. No one in this history community is growing. There's people that would care about this news. A lot of people would care about this news, but no one knows about it. It's gone completely under the radar. People have become so complacent. Like with the Trump shooting, right? It became pretty clear pretty quickly that this was a huge conspiracy. And it's already clear. You had hundreds of people tweeting this, making this comment, thousands, maybe even millions, I don't know, about how, oh, the FBI is going to investigate itself. Oh, the Secret Service is going to investigate itself. That's really going to, accomplish anything. So people are fully aware that the people that are supposed to get to the bottom of this story are not going to do it. People are fully aware that the journalists are not going to do it. So they're fully aware that it comes down to them. It comes down to us. It is now up to us to get to the bottom of it if we want to get to the bottom of it. And has anyone taken that upon themselves? Not that I'm aware of. As far as I know, there's no one really digging into this. We've got 360 million people or whatever it is living in this country, and not a single one cares enough about this unbelievably massive event, this major conspiracy. They just tried to kill. Their goal was to have President Trump's brains being splattered on live TV, and they got real damn close to that goal. And just everyone's moved on. No one's even talking about it anymore. Not even no one's looking into it. No one's even talking about it. No one cares. They've all moved on. They got no answers. They got just enough to know, oh, this stinks to high heaven. This is obviously a huge conspiracy and cover-up going on here. And then everyone just dropped it. So, this whole argument of like, how can they get away with it? What are you even talking about at this point? What do you mean, how can they get away with it? Like, I don't... You know what I'm saying? Jesus Christ. Oh, I have top chat on again. This isn't making sense. Let me see what you guys are actually saying. Yeah, I really want to get, I'm selfish, right? So I really want to get onto some larger channels to present this NAGPRA news, get the news out there, and hopefully get myself out there, get some more viewers. That would be very cool. I'm having a tough time doing that. People are just not responding generally. I got one response, and then when I told them that I wasn't interested in just giving them the story, that I wanted to present it myself, they stopped responding. So I am talking to one person. They're a little busy at the moment though, so that's on pause. But yeah, I don't know what good would telling my local representative about the NAGPRA laws do. I'm not sure what that would really do. But yeah, I don't know. Do I need to keep harping on how ridiculous the "it's too big" is, or is that clear? I honestly don't know, because to me it's utterly ridiculous. They've done so much. They do so much so blatantly, so in your face. They lie right to your face constantly. And then people who are fully aware of that will turn around and be like, but they wouldn't lie. How could they get away with lying to us? How could it even be possible for them to lie? And I can't understand that. I mean, I understand it from a cognitive dissonance standpoint of just like, that's an uncomfortable truth, so you refuse to accept it. But I can't really understand it. Yeah, I mean, that might be cool. So that took a lot less time to cover than I thought. I definitely skipped some points. Not really. I mean, I could keep hammering it. You guys aren't really letting me know in chat if you're already convinced or not, that global cover-ups of history. Let me take this angle for a minute, because I haven't gotten into this yet. So if this is a global conspiracy to cover up history, like, why is everyone cooperating? Why is everyone working together to cover up history? Surely there'd be somewhere, not all of us are allies, right? China, Russia, we're going to World War III here soon. Why are they working with us to cover up history? And the answer is they're not. The reality is that there are many different groups all vying for power. These secret organizations absolutely exist. These conspiracies absolutely exist. I've talked a little bit about how Bill Gates was running the world during COVID. There's different groups, and they all have the same end goal, which is control. They all want to rule the world. Like, that's what this is, right? So they're not working together, generally speaking. They might cooperate, right? And they might even like directly cooperate, not just seemingly cooperate. But they're not really working together. They're all vying for their own power. And it just happens to be that the route to get there shares a lot of similarities across these groups, right? And one of the most powerful means of control is erasing history. It's a very powerful means of control to erase a people's history and their past. And it's also a very effective means of controlling the present. So people love to think that we are living in unprecedented times, that the horrors we're seeing now are brand new and never seen before, the transgenders and just everything. And that is not true even in the slightest. Nothing that we're experiencing now is new at all. This has all been done before repeatedly. And so they hide history from us, from the proles, and keep us stupid. And they use history as a weapon, as a playbook, right? And that's exactly what they're doing. So they don't need to work together to cover up history globally. All of these groups individually want to suppress history. And if, like with Gunung Padang, if there is someone who steps out of line, especially like these smaller countries, they might not be nearly as directly controlled and involved in, these aspects as, European countries and America. They just send someone over and they directly manipulate whatever they need to directly manipulate in order to, shut it down. So, and there's also the fact that archaeology is largely a rich white person thing. it's just rich white Europeans. That's what archaeology is. So in a lot of these smaller third world countries, the archaeology that's being done there is still being done by rich white Europeans. And so, if those guys are controlled, then those countries' archaeology is also controlled because it's still under European control. As well as, like, there's countries that just don't really have active archaeology going on, certainly not from their own, like they just don't have it. That's not your first priority when your people are starving and you have no infrastructure and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know how well I'm presenting this, but this is all very clear to me. So if you do have any issues, if you do have any questions, if you feel like I've missed something or left something out, let me know, and I will, very confident I'll be able to answer it. Next week, I'm not going to get into it this week, but next week I think I will try to address the internet and its role in all of this, which is a very large topic in and of itself. Essentially, our internet is, and I say this with all sincerity and no exaggeration, more controlled than the CCP's internet. Our internet is significantly more controlled than the CCP's internet. And the internet is the greatest tool of information control that has ever been invented by leaps and bounds. I mean, it's not even close. So that's what I'm going to try and address next week. And if no one has any calls to, call in and ask questions about what I've talked about so far, I guess I've covered, the idea of these cover-ups being too big, hopefully satisfactorily. I've been yeah. So I mean, that's essentially what I was just trying to say this whole time, Mr. Galunas. And you don't even necessarily need the key players. Once the narrative is established, it's self-sustaining, right? So this isn't how it works. I've already explained that there's a massive degree of involvement with archaeologists and these three-letter agencies, right? But just theoretically, right? Once you establish that, so you put some key players in place and you establish the narrative, those key players could retire, die, and move on, whatever. And that narrative is still in place, and the people who have no direct involvement whatsoever will self-police themselves. And if they ever do start to get out of line, the only thing you need to keep them in line and remind them of that narrative is the media, which we know the media is very obviously controlled. It's openly controlled. Do you guys remember all of those compilations? Was this like all the way back in 2016, 2018, I think, of all of the local news stations word for word delivering the same story, these supposedly, like independent local news stations, and there's just hundreds of them speaking in unison, saying literally the exact same words. So yeah, our media is obviously and openly controlled. It is purely a propaganda machine at this point. And so you don't even need any players in archaeology, theoretically. There's a lot in there. They have plenty in there, but theoretically, you could do this, establish the narrative. Once it's established, pull your people out. Let it self-sustain. If they ever step out of line, the media steps in. They slander the ever-loving shit out of whoever it was that stepped out of line. They make those ideas so incredibly toxic. No one will touch them with a 10-foot pole. And then all the other archaeologists go back to self-policing and they go, hey, don't say that. Don't present that. So, yeah, you don't even need key players theoretically. You don't even need direct involvement theoretically. That would be kind of cool, Mr. Slav. That's not a bad idea. I don't think, but you know, it's like I've covered the Americas, right? And I've nowhere near covered the Americas. Like I could continue talking about them forever, probably. Um, so you know, when do you scratch it off? It's like you can't really complete a country's history, in my opinion. Thanks, Mr. Morin. I appreciate it. So yeah, I'm sure you know when I listen to this later, I'll be like, oh, I forgot to say so many things, but I guess I'll address that next week. And again, I do encourage calls. If you guys see any issues, if you see any flaws or missing points in my argument, let me know. I'll address it. But again, it's very obvious to me. Hopefully, it's obvious to you guys. I think I'm also preaching to the choir here. You know, so like if I had some normies in chat, I don't know whether they'd be convinced or not, but I'm guessing you guys are probably already pretty convinced of everything I'm saying even before I said it here tonight. So, what's the cover up? So that's a great question. I mean, with America, they're obviously covering up diffusionist ideas, which is the idea that anyone was here before Columbus, which very, very obviously there was a ton of people here before Columbus. You know, the Brazil shipwreck, the Roman ship that made it to Brazil and people found, and then they make diving for shipwrecks in Brazil illegal. Like the cover up's very blatant, and what it is actually a good question. So they're covering up pre-Columbian visitors in America. What else are they covering up? Well, they don't really seem to want us to know about Göbekli Tepe, which is evidence of 12,000-year-old societies. And I still stick with my original ideas, which I presented way back on Danny's show before even starting this show, which is that I think this lost civilization that everyone's looking for, that's still missing, is not this pre-Diluvian 12,000-year-old Atlantis. I think it's a lot more recent. I think it's like 6,000 or maybe a bit more years old. There's just way too many similarities across these megalithic sites around the world for them to not have some type of sharing going on, right? There's, and I don't know what all the answers are, but it's clearly being obscured. It's clearly being hidden. They're clearly not interested in actually getting to the bottom of it. They actively suppress it. There's many examples of this. NAGPRA, they just erased the history of an entire nation, the most powerful nation on earth, and no one even knows about it. No one even cares. Like, think about how easy it would be for them to cover up whatever, any small little thing, right? Because compared to the erasure of the entire history of the most powerful nation in the world, and no one's even aware of it, no one even cares about it, it's so easy for them. You know, and they have the media in their pocket. You have, I talked about, I change gears too much. I jump all over the place, but fuck it. You know, I talked about the story of that teenager who found the Mayan city in Mexico. Totally bullshit, by the way, and I'm disappointed in myself for not catching that the second I saw the story. But yeah, that story it was national news, and the kid didn't discover jack shit. And there's a lot of interesting angles to this. So confirm. Oh, no. Yep, still have 10 minutes. So we're going to test StreamYard here. We're going to see how this works. it doesn't work perfectly. You guys can let me know how bad it is. I've got to get myself in here, which I'm not quite as smooth with. Yeah, fuck that. Give me a minute, fellas. Give me a minute. First time I'm doing this. Good God, I'm struggling. All right. Get the chat back open. Good. This chat open. It's a little frustrating that Dan's decided to take my time slot, because I think a lot of the people who like to watch my show also like to watch his show. So that is the new link for the StreamYard. If you want to call in on StreamYard, you don't have to download anything. You just open up StreamYard and you just open up the internet and click the link, and it should let you call in. What the hell am I even trying to do here? There we go. Okay. So I think you guys can hear me, hopefully without an echo. Let me know. And I will just trying. There we go. Okay. So now, regardless of what I do on my screen, you guys should see this screen. So I'm going to full screen it for you, fellas. And now, yeah. All right. Got it set up. Let me know how it sounds. Let me know how good or bad it is. If this setup works, I'm like not even in the frame anymore, but whatever. So yeah, next week's the internet. I'm gonna try and tackle that and how messed up that's become, and I'm gonna try and explain it from all levels, like down to the engineers. How is all of this even, again, without every single engineer who's coding this and stuff being involved in it? How is this working? And I'm gonna address all of that, and hopefully, again, for the 20th time, I successfully addressed the idea that these things being too big just isn't based in reality. You're sticking your head in the sand. Look at what is going on in this world. Look at what they've gotten away with. Look at what they're openly doing on a daily basis. It's not a mystery. It's not this impossible thing. Sounds fine. All right, that's good to hear. No worse than the Zoom. I tested it yesterday with JR, and it sounded okay, but noticeably lower quality. Extra incentive to call in. You guys don't even have to talk about anything. It would just be to help test how this all sounds with the guest. Make sure I can hear the guest and you guys can hear the guest and all that good stuff. There are a few little issues with this setup. Like, it's not. Now, it currently is impossible for me to play a video for you guys. You guys wouldn't be able to hear it. And even just showing you images is a little more difficult now, but I think I can probably figure out ways to make this work if this is a better option than Zoom. But yeah, if no one's gonna call in, I'm gonna end the stream. I'll catch you next week. I'll update you if if it looks like I'm gonna have a Mormon on the show or not, and I'll keep you updated with the NAGPRA news. Hopefully, I can get someone to help me get this word out. I really want. It's the biggest thing I've uncovered, and probably the biggest thing I ever will uncover. It's ridiculously huge, in my opinion. Yeah, I think this will shake the entire history community. The fact that America's history has been made illegal, and it's gone under the radar for 8 months now, and I don't know. I feel like that should be some kind of wake up call too. That the alternate history, and this has already happened. So someone asked in Discord, they're like, "Oh, this should be an interesting topic, talking about conspiracies and cover-ups." And I wonder if there's a way around it, a way to avoid this, to overwrite, their cover-ups. And there is, and it's already happening. I've talked about this, how the alternate history community, they are diverging and divesting themselves from the narrative of the mainstream. So for a long time, they were arguing with the mainstream. They were arguing against that narrative. And now they're just kind of removing themselves from it. They're going, hey, we don't need your experts. We don't need to rely on your research. We can go do LiDAR scans. We can go do ground penetrating radar. We can just go do all of this stuff ourselves. We can figure this stuff out ourselves. And that is the answer. That is the way to get around all of this stuff. And also just getting people to care, right? Like with NAGPRA, people would care about this. I seem to have frozen. If they knew about it. And with how many people are interested in history, frankly, there really should be enough people that are looking into this that someone else should have found this by now, but they haven't, because people's attention spans are just so cooked that no one, and I sympathize, because, and I'll get into this next week, with the internet, trying to do research is becoming more and more impossible, but no one is actually sitting down and digging into these things, or so few people are anymore. And so I think this could be a real wake-up call for people. They go, oh, look, this is the kind of stuff that you can find if you take the time to look. And the fact that they are divesting from the narrative, the fact that they are realizing that people can go out and make their own discoveries, it's rapidly growing, and it's only going to grow, exponentially from here. So their grip on history is loosening. It's still extremely tight, but I think this is going to happen at an exponential rate. I think that very, very soon, the next few years, you're really going to see things happening. So I'm quite hopeful for that. As far as everything else that's messed up and all of the other cover-ups, because these cover-ups and conspiracies are not limited to history, I don't see the same progress being made yet, but I am hopeful, especially because, history, if the alternate history community is able to break away and actually start getting real answers and getting real momentum, and getting people to just essentially ignore the mainstream and go, we don't even care what you have to say anymore. We're listening to these guys who are actually trying to figure things out. We don't even care what you have to say anymore. That'll be a really good stepping stone. That'll be a good blueprint for what needs to be done elsewhere. So, I'm quite optimistic about history, and to some extent about the world in general. Like I said, I don't see this awakening, this movement happening elsewhere yet, but it can happen very quickly. It's a snowball effect. That snowball has already been created within alternate history, and it's already starting to pick up speed. It's going to be massive here in very short order. And so, these snowballs can be created in other areas as well. Um, it can happen very quickly. I am calling in myself to StreamYard through my mobile phone. So yes, if you're on a mobile phone, you can use StreamYard too. You can call me. You don't need to download anything. You just click the link and it should take you. You may have to use Chrome or Firefox as your browser, but otherwise you should just be able to call in. But yeah, no calls. So that's it. That's the end of the episode. I appreciate you guys. If you have any recommendations for someone to reach out to get this news out about NAGPRA, excuse me, let me know. If you have any issues with what I'm saying, let me know. And I'll catch you next week with the internet and how it is the greatest information control tool to have ever been created. So, also, real quick before I sign out, I haven't brought it up in a while, but the sun is still spicy. I haven't brought it up every single week because it's been spicy every single week. It's a spicy sun now. We just have a consistently spicy sun now. I said it was going to happen. Now it's happening.